4.5 quadratic equations. In this section we're going to talk about factoring, which we just finished a whole unit on, and graphing. And we're going to be solving with those. Alright, so the first thing you want to do is a quadratic equation is in the general form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a, b, and c are real numbers and a cannot be equal to 0. Quadratic equations are polynomials where the highest degree is 2, which means there will be two solutions, which may also be called zeros, x-intercepts, roots. These are all different things that you may be asked. So you need to be real familiar with all of those terms. Solutions to any polynomial equation are where the equation crosses that x-axis. And this is why we must set the quadratic equation equal to 0. So quadratic equations are solved several ways. We've talked about factoring and we've talked about graphing them. We will be doing the square roots, the completion of square, and the quadratic formula in sections to come. But right now, we're only going to be using the factoring and the graphing to solve. Okay? So, if we solve equations by factoring, you're going to write the equation in standard form and then set equal to 0. So in other words, it'll be ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And then you'll set each factor equal to 0 once you have factored it, and then you will solve them. Those two answers are your solutions. Okay, so let's take a look at an example. 7x squared minus, x squared minus 7x plus 10. When we set this equal to 0, okay, we'll factor this. And remember, if there's a positive in the back, that means they're going to have the same sign. Then you look in the front of the linear term, and that tells us that both are going to be negative. So factors of 10 that add to be 7 are 2 and 5, and they're both negative, so that makes x minus 2 and x minus 5. And then you set those equal to 0. You separate them. X minus 2 equals 0, which will make solving for x to be 2. X minus 5 equals 0, and solving for x will make it 5. So you'll notice how the solutions, the zeros or the roots to the quadratic of this one is 2 and 5. 2 and 5. Notice how it's the opposite of what's in the parentheses. Again, this is where I've told you, whenever we're working with things with parentheses, always opposite of what's inside when you're working with the numbers. This is true for this too. So it is going to be a quadratic, and we know that it's going to be a positive quadratic because it's a positive x squared term. So you know it's going to be a minimum, which we've talked about in great detail. It's going to be a minimum, look like that. Now, the thing that we just learned, though, is it's going to cross the x-axis at two places, and that's going to be at 2 and 5. So you come over here to where x is 2, and you put a little circle, and x is 5, and put a little circle. And that is the 2 points where that quadratic is going to cross the x-axis. Now, you can go and put it into your calculator if you wanted to find the vertex, or you can calculate the vertex yourself, because you can figure that out now. If we were to do that by hand, remember the vertex, we have to find the axis of symmetry first, which is opposite of b divided by 2a. So in this case, will be opposite of b will be 7 over 2 times 1, so that's going to be 7 halves. That's what our x coordinate's going to be for our vertex, so I'll just put 7 over 2. And then we take that number, plug it in, and solve for y. So that's going to be 7 halves squared plus, minus. Why does it take off my minus 7 times 7 over 2 plus 10. Alright, so when we figure this out, let's pull up my calculator. pull up my calculator. Alright, so I'm going to scoot this out of the way so I can see what my problem is. Alright, so I'm going to type in 7, whoops, let's do a parenthesis. Parentheses 7 divided by 2, parentheses squared, minus 7, parentheses 7 divided by 2, parentheses plus 10. Oops, get this up a little bit. 10. And hit enter. Whoa. Let me see what I did. Got that part right there. Kind of need that. Let's go back and fix that. Remember, if you need to go back and fix anything, it's second enter and you can go in and put that in. So I'm going to insert and put a 2 right there. Alright, now it should work. Enter. Alright, so that's negative 2.25. So that's math enter, enter. Negative 9/4. So that means my order pair is 7/2 and negative 9/4. Okay, so that's where the vertex is. So 7/2 is the same thing as 3.5. So it's going to be x is 3.5. So in between here, and that one is going to be 2.25 negative. So it's 2 about right there is my vertex in the middle of everything. And you just graph it, making sure it goes through those points. Now you can always find the y-intercept by plugging in a 0. You know it's going to cross at 10, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's off the Richter scale up here. Somewhere up here it's going to cross the y-axis at 10. Okay? So you'll want to set each factor, and when I say factor, that's something that's in parentheses right here. These are factors. These are solutions. Two different things you need to make sure you understand. Set each of the factors equal to 0, and those will be your intercepts, or your solutions, or your zeros, or your roots. All the same thing. Alright? And then just graph it. You should be able to look at a graph and tell what the solutions are. And if they give you a graph, you should be able to go backwards and find the factors. Okay? Alright? Now, when you're graphing, you're going to put the equation in standard form, then solve for y. You're going to enter the y equals equation into your calculator, and you're going to look at the graph and determine where the zeros are. You may need to use second trace 0 to find the exact zeros. Alright, so for example, this is already in y equals, and we can type that into our calculator. So let me pull my calculator back up and move it out of the way. Going to y equals, and I'm going to type in x squared minus 1, and I'm going to graph it. Alright, so you can see this one, it crosses really nice at -1 and +1, and it has a vertex right here at y -1, 0, -1. So you can find all those. You can also look at the table if you need to, and you can find these points at 0, -1, and then your zeros are at -1 and at +1. And there's extra points if you need those to graph it. If you needed to get extra points in there. Okay? If you want the vertex, you can find that also from your table. So this one is going to graph with a point right here. My vertex is right here. And my zeros, or my solutions, or my intercepts are right here, because these factors became x -1, x +1, because we know this is a difference of squares. Okay, we've just finished doing that. When you factor those, it becomes plus 1 minus 1. Set each one of those equal to 0. So these are the factors. These are the solutions. And then you just graph through those points. Okay, and there's your graph. Again, you should be able to tell if they give you a graph and say what the factors are. Okay, say I had a dot over here at this point right here, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. If I had a point over here at x is 4, then that means the factor that went with that was a minus 4. Because remember, anytime you do this, the parentheses backwards. It's the opposite. So if it's a plus 4, it'll be a minus 4 in parentheses. If it was a minus 4, it would be a plus 4 in parentheses. So just know that if you're looking at the dots, if you're looking for the factors, it's the opposite, and they're in parentheses like this, okay? All right, so you should be able to go backwards and forwards from the graph and the factored form. And we will practice this in class, and if you have any questions, come see me.